Welcome to the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast, where we talk to computer scientists who immigrated from their home countries for study or for work or for other reasons. In these oral history interviews, you will find established and renowned computer scientists from across academia and industry narrating their experiences of immigrating from where they grew up to a completely different land, often the US. My name is Indy Gupta, and I'm your host. This is a remix episode. I spoke with several prominent computer scientists, originally from Yugoslavia, about how they dealt with the Balkan Wars of the 1990s and 2000s and its effect on their lives. You'll hear the voices of Jelena Merkovic, Research Associate Professor at the University of Southern California. Then you'll hear Nenad Medvedovic, Professor of Computer Science at the University of Southern California. Third will be the voice of Dejan Milojic, Distinguished Technologist at Hewlett-Packard Labs. You can hear the full interviews with these distinguished computer scientists in the Yugoslavia episode, that's episode 1, and also their full interviews are available in episodes 2 through episodes 4. All available on our website, csimmigrant.org, and on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and basically wherever you get your podcasts. And the episode guide for this remix episode, like all other episodes, is available on our website, csimmigrant.org. This is the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast. The Balkan Wars in the 1990s and early 2000s influenced the lives of all our three narrators. In the 1990s, Jelena was doing her schooling and then university in Belgrade until 1998, when she moved to the US. In the 1990s, Nenad was already in the US doing his schooling, BS, and PhD. And in the 1990s, Dejan was already in Germany finishing his PhD, and then he moved to the US. We hear from all three of them next.
High school years were when everything was just starting. And we were all new. So the end of elementary, maybe the last year of elementary school and the whole high school was when the wars were either brewing or they were starting. And there were a lot of friends that, had brothers drafted into army and, coming back looking as and behaving as zombies and, with PTSD. And so that was... That was a big unknown that impacted all of us, I think, at that time. And then when we went to university, for our generation at least, there was more turbulence in Serbia. There were demonstrations against the regime, and we all participated in those, and we were hoping that, this will make a difference. And it wasn't really making a difference immediately. It took years and years and years.
Nenad Medvedovic, Professor of Computer Science at the University of Southern California.
That was very difficult. At that time, there was a TV station called Scola, which you might actually not remember because you're younger than I am. It was, and certainly, telling kids nowadays what it was like is it's just this imaginary world that they can't comprehend. There was no internet. There was basically, we had just started using email, and that was the select few who were, in places of higher learning and so on. And Scola was, and then I was still writing letters back and forth with my parents. So, a letter would take somewhere between 7 and 10 days to arrive. Sometimes it wouldn't arrive for a month. Sometimes it wouldn't arrive at all. So getting information back and forth was very difficult.
Did you call them? Or did you speak on the phone?
Yeah. Calling them was very tricky because
expensive too, I guess.
AT&T had a plan that would a minute would cost over $2. which at that time was unimaginably expensive for me. But on weekends, so Saturday morning after 2 a.m. and Sunday morning after 2 a.m., it would be like 84 cents a minute or something like that. So many late Saturday nights, early Sunday mornings, I would, force myself with the aid of coffee, sometimes Vivarin, in fact, to stay up. So, sort of medicate yourself so you can speak to your parents, kind of thing. So I could at least hit the cheaper rate, but it wasn't practical for me to call them too much because I just didn't have any money. So there was a place at my university that was actually showing Scola. It was one of the libraries or something like that. And I would go there to watch the news. And since the country just quickly disintegrated, every night they would have, or every day rather, they would have the nightly news from Belgrade from the previous night. And they would also have the news from 5 days ago from Croatia. So the Croatian news, for whatever reason, from Zagreb were 5 days old. From Belgrade, they were a few hours old. And I would watch that to stay up to speed. And it was incredibly unnerving. I felt like somebody was just kind of ripping my heart to shreds. It was that hard to see my country fall apart like that. And then my dad I had multiple cousins who ended up on the front lines. My dad was on the front line. I've had first cousins who were on both sides of the conflict. So it was just very messy because I come from a mixed marriage, ethnically mixed marriage.
So returning to your timeline, around the time that you're graduating from UC Irvine with your PhD, 1999, that's when the war in the Yugoslavia area is really reaching its peak. Did you at that point of time, or actually any time after that in the decade that followed, consider going back at all?
No. So the war kind of reached its peak at the most inopportune time for me. I had a baby boy. So I graduated, technically, I defended and turned my dissertation in December of 98, but the degree didn't get conferred until 1999. And in January of 99, I actually started my new job at USC. And I immediately had to start teaching, and I had to start teaching a class that had not existed before, so I had to put it together. At the same time, my mom arrived to help with my son, and that's when the NATO bombing of what we called the rump Yugoslavia, so Serbia and Montenegro, began because of the atrocities that were happening in Kosovo at the time against the Albanians. So it was on every single front. I felt like I was just basically taking on water. I was just sinking in every possible way. My home life was incredibly tense. We're not getting very much sleep because of the baby. My mom is here. My dad and sister are there. The bombs are getting dropped on them, as are all my cousins and aunts and uncles and so on. And of course, the job was very demanding, as I'm sure you remember from early on. I mean, everything is new. You're trying to figure everything out. You're trying to take on new students. You're trying to get funding, all this stuff, right? It was not the funnest part of my life. Let's put it that way. The first couple of years they really took a toll. And part of the reason I think even my marriage disintegrated was because there was just so much stress surrounding everything. And it's very difficult to figure out kind of how to deal with all of that. And then, it goes away. It kind of, you find a different path. So in the long run, it's fine. I mean, it's 1999 through, let's say, 2002-3. I wouldn't necessarily want to go back to that time. It wasn't I don't have the fondest memories of those years. And any one of those things would have been hard. Raising small children, difficulties in whatever your personal relationships are. Obviously, war. And then of course starting a new career as an academic, which can be very stressful. But despite that, I mean, going back was just never an option for me. I maybe I'm a minority. I know there are people who are kind of like me. There are not that many of us, but there are people who, I've spoken to who have said basically that once Yugoslavia fell apart, that was it. Like there was nothing left behind that they felt was theirs or where they felt they belong. And I'm one of those people. I know I'm a significant minority, but that's just how it is. Well, for one thing, it's not one country. It is kind of the places that I generally tend to go to. It's four: Bosnia, Herzegovina, Croatia, Montenegro, Serbia. Each one of them is very different from every other one. Each one of them is, I hope that, people don't get, from that region especially, don't get angry at me for saying this, but each one of them is dysfunctional in its own way. So going back is mostly, it's fun as a way of kind of reminiscing, seeing places where I grew up and I remember from my childhood, and also seeing friends and family. Any kind of more global sort of perspective would get me deeply depressed, so I try not to think about it.
Next up, Dejan Milojic, Distinguished Technologist at Hewlett-Packard Labs. Returning to the point where you moved to Germany to do your PhD, and this is 1991, and you were there till 1994.
Really end of 1993.
93. There was a language change. There was, of course, a culture change. I want to ask about, what the cultural differences were and what was the hardest thing for you when you moved to Germany. And I also want to ask about, how it was managing your family with, you mentioned 2 kids.
Well, let's start with the more important, managing family with 2 kids. It was not easy, but if you ask my wife, she probably would say that was the best time of her life. Because Germany as a country, it's very nice to kids. They have all kinds of opportunities there, and they went to the preschool, the older daughter, the younger one had a lot of opportunities. There are a lot of parks, a lot of amusement parks, and Europe in general, they take care of kids substantially. So, but at the same time, it was a small apartment, 1 bedroom and a kitchen. We even had my mother-in-law come. She slept in the kitchen to help my wife, because my younger daughter came, she was, I think, 8 months old. And even more interesting was that they came literally with the last flight out of Belgrade. Right. After that, the airport was closed, so no one could fly after that. And the war started fully. We did come by buses periodically, once or twice for the summers when things would, calm down. But it was not easy. And for me, obviously, it was tough, but, I would go and work. And once you work, you focus on that. And
if you haven't already done so, please listen to the previous segments in the show. We covered Yugoslavia in episodes 1 through 4, Brazil in episodes 5 through 8, the Middle East in episodes 9 through 12, US Virgin Islands in episode 13, and China in episode 14. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes from the Immigrant Computer Scientist podcast as we visit other parts of the world. All the music used in episodes of the Immigrant Computer Scientist podcast is royalty-free. All voice recordings were performed with and are reproduced with full consent of narrators and participants. You can find music credits on our website. Join the online discussion about this podcast on all major social media, including Twitter and Facebook, with the handle CSImmigrant and hashtag CSImmigrant. And of course, the episode guide is available at our website, csimmigrant.org. This is the Immigrant Computer Scientists Podcast.